You know when the winter blues really hit, so what do? You go out and you buy plants. That's just natural. It's normal. It's what we do. Plant people to get over these depressing days just staying at home. Well, that's what I did. This super promotion table, buy 5 orchids, get 6 problems. So in this series, I'm going to show you what went horribly wrong. I'm going to talk about orchid problems and what can go wrong with your orchid. But not only one, I find 2. I find blossoms that have withered prematurely and dropped. I mean, 3, 4 leaves, and it's just depressing because you get these orchids to survive winter and you bring them home and then wham, they die. So in this video, I'm going to tell you first what to look for signs in a healthy orchid, and there are 13 signs. So when you're looking for a healthy orchid, the first thing you want to notice are the leaves. Look at the leaves, see if they are firm to the touch. If you can bend them easily, then they aren't healthy at all. If they're limp, the bottom ones can be a little limp, but see, even the bottom ones resist firm, they resist being handled. So if you just push a little bit on the leaf and it bounces back up with resilience, then you have a healthy leaf because it's hydrated, it's keeping that nutrient balance inside, the leaf is resistant to touch. Now from the leaves, the second sign you're going to see are in the roots. If you have nice silvery green roots, see, some people think that the silver roots are not good. That's just because they haven't been watered. So when you water these silver roots and they turn a vibrant green color, that is a healthy orchid because the roots are absorbing. Now, an unhealthy orchid will have these brown crunchy roots. Even if your orchid root is yellow, that doesn't mean it's unhealthy. That just means it doesn't have enough light, so the chlorophyll in there is non-existent. So the chlorophyll is going to get the light and change that into energy. And if there's no light in the middle of the pot, why is the orchid going to send chlorophyll there? It doesn't make any sense. So even yellow roots in the middle of the pot are healthy. The third point is what we usually look at first, but we shouldn't, is the blossoms. Now when it's a healthy blossom, usually we look at oh, that's beautiful, because it can be beautiful one day and then the very next turn into this and drop off and fade prematurely, because all orchids will drop their flowers. So if your blossoms are falling off prematurely, and that means like the buds don't even mature, they're dropping off before they mature, or the blossom, it will open one day and then on the very next it's on your table or on the floor. Each flower on the Phalaenopsis will stay in bloom for about a week or 2, and that means that when it opens, it has a week, then it drops, then a few more open, so they can stay in bloom up to a couple months. If one blossom is opening and the very next day it drops, your orchid is not healthy and you need to investigate what is happening. A healthy orchid is always going to have a great potting media. So when you get home and you see that it's planted in a plug type cookie base brownie slush peat moss type thing, you need to get it out of there because that is going to become an unhealthy orchid later. See, what happens is this plug that it comes in, or tightly packed moss, that's great for the nurseries, but indoors you're going to have a hard time watering that. And you're going to unless you have a professional misting system or some kind of drip system, then you can keep the plug, because the plug isn't unhealthy in those conditions. But as normal growers, like we're going to put them by our windowsill, or we're going to put them under lights, and we're going to water them once a week or soak them, that kind of medium doesn't work. Now, I did a whole series on potting media, and you can check it out up here, of how to find a good potting media. So if you have a bad potting media, your orchid's going to become unhealthy, even if it isn't now, but it will become unhealthy. The next point in identifying a healthy orchid is to identify the hydration. A very poorly hydrated orchid is going to have deep veins in the leaves. The leaves are going to turn a leathery color, both in their touch and in their feel. Healthy orchids are going to maintain a shine or a luster to them, a natural luster, without putting any ingredients on them, any shine or anything else. They're going to be a color that holds up with time. An unhealthy orchid will show deep veins where it's not getting enough hydration. That's either because the roots are bad or because the watering cycle hasn't been adjusted yet. So those two things are going to determine how your orchid reacts, in terms of hydration, that is. Another thing to determine about a healthy orchid is to look at the air roots. If the air roots are coming out and they're turning brown immediately, and they're turning crunchy and dying on you, that means your relative humidity, the humidity inside your environment, inside your living room or home office, is not adequate for this orchid. So it might be getting enough water inside the pot. You might be great doing that, but if your relative humidity around your orchid is too low, it's going to suck out that humidity from the orchid roots. That's why the aerial roots dry up so quickly. So if you have aerial roots that are drying immediately, that means that your relative humidity is dropping quickly. So you need to either get a humidifier or a humidity tray or some kind of way to, you can mist in the morning. Some people have to mist at night too. Just don't mist on the crown or anywhere by the stem. Just make sure it's on the leaves, and you always have a fan. So yes, you can mist your orchids. You should mist your orchids if your house is a really low humidity. The seventh sign of a healthy orchid is the level of light where you have this orchid. So if your orchid is growing in a space where it's bright, because sometimes we think of low light orchids and we like to stick them in a bottom shelf where it's gloomy and there's no light at all. And it's like, well, it was low light orchid. It's not going to be healthy like that. Then it's going to turn not this color green, but a dark, dark, dark green. So what's happening is the chlorophyll inside that leaf isn't receiving enough light. So it's not receiving enough energy. So the plant thinks, well, the plant doesn't think, but you get the point. If I have more chlorophyll, any light that I get, I can automatically transform that into energy. So the plant starts producing tons and tons of chlorophyll, which will turn this plant a bright, bright green. On the other hand, if you get your Phalaenopsis and put it in a window that gets all afternoon sun and sun that just toasts it to a crisp, of course, it's not going to do very well. So make sure the sun that is coming through your window is not getting more than, and in Phalaenopsis case, more than 2 hours of morning sun. It cannot be afternoon sun because that will burn the leaves. Orchids do not recover from sunburned leaves. It's incredibly hard. That place where they were sunburned and that leaf cell died, it does not recuperate. Another sign of a healthy orchid is that it does not have patches on the leaves, like it's not discolored. And I'll show you an extreme example of this, is this orchid right here. This is an extreme example of discoloration in the orchid leaf, and this is caused by several reasons, which I will get into in the next videos, of why this happened and how to prevent it and how to treat it. So if you see an orchid like this, do not buy it. Walk away, put a blindfold on, turn around, just give up. Do not buy an orchid like this. Now let's get him out of the way, out of the picture, off my desk, out of my life. And put you back in the spotlight. Another sign of a healthy orchid is one that is root bound inside the pot. Now, why is that a sign of being healthy? Because remember back in where these orchids grow in their natural environments, they're attached to trees. They grow on trees and they cling to trees. So those roots not only are providing nutrients, not only are providing air, humidity, gas exchange, they are grasping for life, because if a rainstorm happens, and they're very common, then they need to hold on. So when the orchid sends out its roots, that's why it will send out the roots to the sides of the pot first, and the middle of the pot will have less roots. So the roots look for the side to attach to something. When they feel that firmness inside the pot, then they're going to work on the leaf production and the flower spike and growing up and dividing and becoming fuller. But they won't do that unless they have their roots firm attached to something. So if they have this little bitty root system and it's looking for the sides of the pot, it's going to look and look and look and look for months on end until it finds that pot. So a root-bound orchid is going to produce a lot quicker, healthier blooms for you than one that is still struggling in life to find its place. The 10th sign of a healthy orchid is you can see in the leaves. The leaves tell the story. It's like a journal, a diary of how they grow in life. So if your orchid has, it should have smaller leaves on the bottom, and each year they get a little bigger, a little plumper, until they get to a uniform size, and then they'll grow that size the same every year after that. So if you have an orchid that has really big leaves and then the next year they have really shriveled leaves or shrinkled tiny dwarf leaves, something happened that year that really stunted its growth. So when you pick up an orchid to buy and you notice that big leaf, big leaf, big leaf, tiny leaf, stay away from that one. The 11th tip doesn't actually apply to Phalaenopsis because they don't have pseudobulbs. But if you're buying a Cattleya, or if you're buying a Dendrobium, or if you're buying a Catasetum, if you're buying some other type of orchid, look at the pseudobulb. Look at the uniformity of the pseudobulbs. If you have nice green pseudobulbs that are kind of plump, and then the next one is shriveled up and has deep veins in it, deep grooves, that means it was dehydrated at some point and the root system is probably not very good. So look for the uniformity, and I say uniformity because pseudobulbs come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. Don't look, well, all pseudobulbs should be long, straight, and slender. No. Some are short, round, and fat, some are triangular, some are elongated. Make sure that they are uniform throughout the orchid. If you have signs of thick, thick, thin, thick, thick, thin, something's going on with the orchid where it's not getting enough nutrients. Now the older pseudobulbs, of course, will be more wrinkled, will be more, and the trick here is when you look at the pseudobulbs, they also tell a story, just like the Phalaenopsis leaves. The older pseudobulbs, when they start to die off, they're going to become so wrinkled and so shriveled, but then the next ones are going to be healthy. They're going to be healthy, 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 healthy. So they should not go backwards and become wrinkled this way. They should become wrinkled in the past, not the present, future. The next tip, the 12th tip, and I already touched on this a little bit when I talked about the humidity, is nice plump aerial roots. Now I don't have any aerial roots on this one, but if you have an orchid and it does have aerial roots and you're noticing that they are crunchy, raise that humidity. And talking about the leaves telling a story like a diary, I just want to give like a behind the scenes to tell you how things are going about, because I'm really excited about this. I am putting together a journal or a diary to help you start your orchid collection, and it's just a way for you to keep track of like what potting media, when was the last time you fertilized, what fertilizer did you use, when was it in bloom, who'd you buy it from, what's on your wish list for your next orchid. So it is still in the process, it's in the final stages. I'm also working on an Excel sheet, so because paperback has limitations, and this book is 365 pages currently, that can change, but that does have limitations. Like the journal I'm working on has space for 35 orchids and to keep detailed notes about them. But we all know that orchid care is an addiction. You get one and you don't always stop at one. So with this Excel sheet, with this spreadsheet, you can, how many rows does the Excel sheet have? Like 105,000 rows? I have to check that. But I just want to keep you guys in the loop to know what's going on with that. So it is in the final stages. If you want to check it out to see what's happening with that, go to orchideria.com/orchid-journey. So I'm really excited about that. But back to healthy orchids. How do we know to identify 13 signs of a healthy orchid and whether I should buy this orchid or not? Or how to evaluate if my orchid care is good or not. And the very last sign, number 13, is your orchid to be healthy? It won't have any pests and insects and little critters that inhabit this earth that should not be here, but are here to stay, and also inside our pot. So to do this, you need to actually take your time and analyze, look especially under the leaf, because that's where they love to stay. Look at the stem and look at newer growth, because the newer growth is going to be softer to chew through, and the orchid sends the most nutrients to the newer growth, so it's going to be richer in nutrients. It's kind of like a buffet for these insects. It's the most hydrated part of the orchid is the newest growth, and that's why they also love the blossoms, like especially the buds, because to form a bud they have to have a lot of humidity inside the bud, because some of these pests are extremely hard to get rid of. And one that actually doesn't hurt the orchid but will identify a sign that something's wrong are fungus gnats. So if you get close to your orchid and you have to keep going like this because all these little fruit flies are getting around it, that's just saying your potting media is breaking down and it's too acidic, and you need to change the potting media right away. Those are the 13 signs of healthy orchids. I'm going to each week send out a new video of a different hazard or a different problem that your orchid will be going through. But if you don't want to wait week after week, all of my tutorials on here are written already up in articles, and you can go to www.orchideria.com for what is specific about your orchid. And some of these, for example, ring spot virus, I really can't do a tutorial on, because what am I going to show? I have to wait till my orchid gets that to make a video about that. Please go ahead and go over to the website, and that's why I'm not going to recommend a video here, because I do want you to go over to the website. And also remember, check out Orchid Journey to see how the progress is evolving with that. If you subscribe to the website, you will get a free fertilization guide. So if one of your problems is the discoloration in the leaf, and you notice it's getting curled leaves, or it's getting purpley, or it's having yellow spots, that fertilization can help a lot. So go to the website, you'll get a fertilization guide and also a monthly newsletter from me. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope your orchids, if they're not healthy, they will become healthy through the next weeks when you learn how to take care of them. In all, I hope to see you in the comments below, and happy cultivating!